I was hoping to do today between the executive committee meeting and this meeting. Didn't have a chance to do it, so I'm still working through the transcripts of both days of the April hearing. Almost finished, and I was hoping to kind of get back through and go back through the document that Professor Gewirtz had put together. And again, just things have not quite worked out that way. But anyway, Leah, welcome. I was just wondering if you might be willing to introduce yourself, because William is here, from the archives. He's new, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows each other. And then Janice, if you could introduce yourself after Leah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm on the quiet car, so I'm just going to try to whisper a little bit. But it's nice to see you all. Happy Friday. I'm one of the principals of 3PV Consulting, and we're the report writers for all this important work that you all have been doing over the past 6 years. And so it's nice to see you all. And yeah, sorry, we were sitting in a completely different Google Meets for about 5 minutes until we realized that we needed to make our way here. So sorry about that.
No worries. No worries.
Yes.
And
Good to meet you all.
If you could go next. And
yeah, so I'm the other principal of 3PV Consulting, and we are a mother-daughter team, in case you didn't see a resemblance or in case Leah calls me mom. So that's who we are, and we're the report writers. And again, yeah, we were in a different Google Meet, so thanks for your patience.
No worries at all. As I said, we were just getting started, and I still need to get some more caffeine. But before I do that, just again, to kind of say where we are and why my blood pressure has gone up is because, Monday we're supposed to have the full commission vote to approve the recommendations that we're going to then give to Leah and Janice to spin into part 2 of the final report, with all the recommendations. And as I said, I feel completely ill-prepared because I haven't had a chance to go back through the written testimonies that were submitted. I mean, I've read a couple of them when they first came in, but it's been a few months. And so, I want to try to make sure that whatever we submit reflects as much of the materials that we've accumulated through the hearing processes. And again, I've got to give Professor Gewirtz and her students all kinds of props for having gone through all of the transcripts of all of the hearings and making it so wonderfully easy to find appropriate quotations to support whatever recommendations were made over those, 13, 14 hearings, just massive amount of work that facilitated. And so again, this is kind of where we are. And again, I don't know, I guess the best way, because there's a lot of stuff on that spreadsheet. And again, I've got to give props to Commissioner Coles for the work that you've done in terms of updating and kind of moving things around. So again, thank you for all of that work. But I think our big task is to try to go through that and try to figure out recommendations that we want to put forward to the full commission on Monday. And then also, the other question that's come up is, do we want to establish priorities? I figure since we have Leah and Janice here, this would be a good time to kind of figure out what format, what shape do you want, this stuff coming to you. I know you would ask if you wanted us to sort of, to just give it to you and then you just kind of write it up as it's presented, or if you need to spin up narrative, this would be a great time to kind of talk about those issues. So I don't know how we should proceed. Should I pull up the and possibly share the spreadsheet just to kind of show everybody what we've got so far? Okay, so all right. Might help if I go for screen share. So if I can hear, where the heck did that go? Ah,
Eric, I invite you just to unmute and jump in since Nick may not be able to see the platform right now. That you have a question or hands up.
Oh, okay. I was just going to comment that, Nick, you mentioning about the potential to prioritize the recommendations.
yes.
That so I think I've mentioned in a call that many of you are probably on in the past that I've done some research looking at recommendations across 13 different Latin American cases. So I'm not going to claim I won't claim that no Truth Commission has ever done that, but no Latin American one has done that, like to prioritize. And so I think it would be path breaking as far as I can tell. There's also research in other contexts that suggests that that when recommendations, and this research tends to be in around recommendations from international courts and international bodies, that when prioritization happens, that actually boosts implementation. So so that there might be some benefits for doing that. And I wonder that if even if you don't choose to do that, whether they're bureaucrats or nonprofits, activists, will interpret the order in which they're presented as being your priorities, even if they're not intended.
No, that's great context. Thank you, Eric. That's yeah. Again, I wasn't familiar, but I think that's maybe sort of obliquely just kind of say, yep, here's what we're presenting, and then they see the priorities. But yeah, I think if there's a way that we can kind of say, yeah, there's a lot of them, and again, as you'll see, there's a lot, in these, particularly in the criminal justice section. I mean, Michelle, you really laid it all out there. So I think in some ways, if we can kind of say, yeah, there's a lot here, but if nothing else, bare bones minimum, these are the top 3 priorities, say, in each section, and again, I don't know if we want to stay with the, it's like the different sheets that we have, we got criminal justice symbolic. Oh, that's right. I've got to go over here to move, so we've got the symbolic ones, education reform, and again, there were things that I wanted to go back through, Professor Gevirtz's piece to kind of go back through just to make sure that we're not missing anything. We've got media, mental health, recommendation material things, community healing. So we've got, I would say, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, potentially 8 sections, that we could say, here's how we've, broken the recommendations down. And maybe that's a way to go. I don't know what, yeah, go ahead.
No, just one last thought on this is that, and I worry that I'm contradicting what I just said, and that I also think that it can be problematic to kind of, if the commission is, well, it's tricky if the commission is kind of saying, okay, well, here are 50 recommendations, or how many there are, and then you're essentially saying, okay, well, if you do any of them, do these 5. You're essentially saying the others are less important, and I don't know if you're comfortable doing that, and so I don't know. It's hard.
That would be my concern with doing any type of prioritization, especially because I think that some of the recommendations may be considered low-hanging fruit that may have more bipartisan agreement to them, that may be a lower priority to us, but politically may be easier to pass. And so I would be hesitant to prioritize them, because then we might not get some of the easy stuff, and the stuff that's the higher priority might be the most challenging to get through. And so I would kind of just I would prefer to present them with, these are all the things that we think need to be done, and try to see how many we can get to the finish line.
Okay. Yep. That sounds good. As I said, I mean, honestly, I think we actually have more than 50 things in there already, which is a good problem to have, and so I think, strategically, I'm thinking, let's just maybe, for Leah and Janice, I would just say, okay, these are the sections that we have: criminal justice, recommendation, symbolic, educational, and just, plan on that being sort of like 8 sections. Is that going to be too unwieldy? And again, Leah and Janice, feel free to chime in, since this will be directly affecting your lives.
Thank you for that, Nick. Yes, especially given the deadline that we have.
Yeah.
I think a question that we have, not just to this group, but to the folks who are going to be making the vote on Monday, is the extent to which you all are attached to the specific language that's inside each one of these boxes. And if any single word is changed, which changes the whole meaning of the recommendation, and you don't want us to touch it, we need to know that, because otherwise our inclination would be to cut and paste and do some smoothing out. There would be transitional sentences, there would be, that sort of thing. But basically, the language as written would be what we would plug into the recommendations. And so, more than anything else, I think that's going to be critical for us and our ability to deliver on time. If you see any place where there might be some controversy among the commissioners, among the Reconciliation Committee, and you need to hash it out, this would be the time to do that, right? So that we can we can meet the task and do it well.
I think that sounds good to me. I would just say, as you're reading it, if anything is unclear or ambiguous, or you question whether it would have the intended effect, if you could just maybe reach out to the commissioners. What we tried to do, and we didn't do this entirely, but we tried to do was assign a commissioner to each one of the topics, and so we can kind of communicate to you who worked on what. And so if you have that follow-up question, for instance, for criminal justice, come to me. I drafted almost all of these. So if you have any questions about anything there, I'm happy to take feedback. If you're like, Michelle, I don't think this says what you think it says, let me know. And then maybe I can even alternate language, or you could suggest something and we can kind of like navigate that. What I tried to do in how I put the spreadsheet together was, as Nick said, we've got the 8 different topics, but then B, within the topics with type of reform, I tried to group them by categories. So if, as you see in the criminal justice section, the first one is police accountability. And so then there's like 5 recommendations. I'm making up numbers, but 5 recommendations under police accountability. Then we have police training. Then we have police policies, right? So different things like that. And so what I was hoping you guys would do is kind of like you said, those transition sentences, you could put the transition sentence for that subgroup, like police accountability, and then you could just follow it with the recommendations. And then, as you know, we've got the recommendations, and then we also have the legal justification. So what I also tried to do was almost cut and paste the legal justifications where it was a similar justification. So that could even be that transitional section, and then you could put the recommendations that are all justified by the same thing under that. So I just wanted to try to like help you guys out as much as possible.
Bless you.
Yes. with giving you language, especially given the short timeline,
Right.
and with the criminal justice in particular, I did a summary of kind of the overarching theme umbrella of how all the criminal justice recommendations fit. And so I there's a top line that where I say summary, and I put it under recommendation just because I didn't have anywhere to put it. But the main focus is that in general, we're dealing with a lack of accountability for white perpetrators and a lack of due process for Black suspects. And so pretty much the entire criminal justice recommendations are intended to kind of address that, you know, that two sides of that same coin, increasing accountability and increasing due process protections for suspects.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I just
very
want to give you
helpful.
that frame.
And I think somewhere there's a list of who's associated with which set of recommendations.
If not, we'll send it to you.
Okay, please just assume that we don't have it and send it.
Yeah,
to
I'll
us,
assume you don't
please.
have
Okay,
Yeah.
Maybe I'll create a another row and I'll put the name of the commissioner
that'd
at
be
the
great.
top row, and then you could just see right there who. But there was a couple places where you know, like I had ideas, Nick had ideas that bled into different topics, and so where that happened, I put our names in parentheses next to the recommendation because it's different from the main person who worked on it. So if
Got
you have
it.
questions about that specific, then you'll find either me or Nick's names primarily in the
Okay,
parentheses.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And following up on what you were saying, Michelle, I mean, as I was going through the April hearing transcripts, I mean, one of the things that, you know, I was thinking, you know, how do we do this, you know, but again, sort of, you know, particularly in the you know, it's like in the criminal justice and policing panels, I mean, just that culture of impunity, you know, that seems to be there, particularly in the policing side of things. How, you know, and again, my initial thought was, how do we break that? As okay, how do we transform that culture of impunity to one of accountability?
Mhm.
And again, I'm still percolating ideas, and I'm thinking, you know, come the weekend, even though I've got to prepare for interviews on Monday, want to take some time and go back through and see if we can flesh some of those ideas out. Because, yeah, I mean, like eliminating qualified immunity, I think is going to go a long way to eliminating some of that sense of impunity that seems to be present in local law enforcement agencies. And so that's why, again, I just feel horribly underprepared for this. But if you all don't mind, I will probably, again, as I said, try to continue over the weekend to get some of these ideas down and on here. And again, try to follow the format as much as possible. But yeah, I mean, I think so. If there are other ideas or other things that you think we should be including here, you know, based on your reading of things, please, by all means, share them, you know.
And definitely,
yeah, I was going to
give
say, everybody has access to this. So as editors, so you should be able to just get in there and add anything that you think is appropriate.
But I would say if you edit anything, if you could perhaps do it as a comment or do it in some way where the person who worked on it knows you edited. And so on the things that I didn't work on, I made it a comment. So to basically say to the person who drafted it, hey, I suggest this. So I would say do it that way. So that way there's still like a chain, you know, that we don't lose stuff.
Would also say too, if possible for the final report, it seems like if each of the recommendations or calls to action can be numbered in some way, that will make it easier for bodies later on to monitor what has been implemented or not. And that could probably be done by sections. So if there's 80 calls to action to strengthen accountability under criminal justice, but some sort of way that enables bodies, I'm thinking like the Yellowhead Institute that did this in Canada, to really kind of monitor what's been implemented and what's not.
Great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
And that kind of reinforces the value of being as specific as possible.
Mhm.
Then it will become easier to for those organizations, whoever's wanting to check whether it's actually been implemented or not.
Mhm. Yeah, and as I'm thinking about this, I mean, would we want to identify either point people or saying, this is the agency that would be tasked with having to implement this recommendation, or should we let the legislators figure that out?
I'm kind of thinking leave it to the legislators, because it's entirely possible that some of the recommendations is not an existing body. They may need to create something, and they
Yeah.
may need to create a monitor. They may need to create positions to do this. And so I might leave it flexible.
Okay.
Creating a body to monitor what's been implemented, which I think we've talked about
Yeah.
before. That would be
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, we should probably make that as a specific recommendation because we don't have that as a recommendation.
Can I ask this question? Because I've struggled with this a bit, a lot, quite frankly. And I think it's coming from a very practical, very tangible legal perspective in terms of if we look at this kind of international framework for reparations and really making links where someone is tangibly harmed. I mean, we have some big picture ideas here, which I think are great. However, I think some of the challenge I'm having is around, we're going to provide this report with these kind of huge recommendations, and how do they tie to the people who were actually victimized?
Mhm.
I struggle there quite a bit. And so, like, when I read some of the recommendations, and even when I think about the expert testimony, I think things were really great. But it's the practicality of it, it's the tangibility of it, and how it connects with those who were victims or their families that to be real frank, I'm concerned about. So I'm trying to see what recommendations can be put forth that are very tangible and concrete and directly related to those who were harmed.
Stephanie, I know I sent you, I only sent you the criminal justice recommendations because I know I definitely wanted to get your insight on those. But have you gotten a chance to look at the whole spreadsheet, or have you only seen the criminal justice ones?
I did the criminal justice, and I'm going to tell you, I
Nice.
added things on the criminal justice, and some were criminal justice, but some were not. So I want to tell you,
Okay.
your spreadsheet may be a little messed up because I added things that weren't criminal justice related. Some things were,
Okay.
but some things were not.
So you're saying you added some, okay. All right, you'll give it to me. So I'll see how to incorporate it.
It's there. It's already there. I put it in the document.
Oh, it's is it new recommendations?
Yeah.
Can you just put your name in parentheses next to the
Mhm.
things you added?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So on the material, I think your question is going to go more towards the material recommendations tab. And so if you take a look at that tab, in particular, row 5, it says compensation for descendants of racial terror, lynching victims, families, and communities. And then there's more things also in material reparations, as well as some community healing stuff and some mental health stuff. And so I think, like, to your question about like the people directly affected, we have some things there, but if you have ideas of additional things, please, add them. This is the time. So add them. And if you could just put a parentheses next to your name, and then we'll be able to consider those as well. But I think the question of reconciliation, to me, requires asking how do you address the harm that has happened? But to me, it also asks the preventative question: how do you prevent these things from occurring again? And so I think certainly with the criminal justice recommendations that I was making, I was thinking more prospectively as what was wrong that allowed this to occur, and how do we fix what was wrong so that these things do not continue to occur? And so that's one piece of the reconciliation question. And then I think the other piece is certainly making amends to the people that were harmed. And so if you have additional recommendations of what we should be doing there, please include them.
Okay. They're there. I have to move them from your criminal justice sheet.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, there's also symbolic. So there's a number of different categories.
Yeah. In fact, I was actually just going back and looking because like one of the things that I wanted to say is, thinking back to, I think it was the Somerset County hearing where they said, we weren't able to give our ancestor a proper burial. And it was like, I thought I had put in and I did, sort of saying, yes, let's have the state do symbolic burials for all of these, victims of racial terror, lynching.
I appreciate you saying that, because that was something that I added on the criminal justice sheet. Didn't know that it was the criminal justice sheet. And it was about burying loved ones, but it was also about cemeteries and relocating from these areas because of that racial terror lynching. And then those cemeteries now falling into disrepair because those families are no longer there.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think we've got in the material, or it might be in symbolic, but again, saying that yes, preservation of African-American cemeteries and, those, memorials and things like that. Yeah. Should be done as well. Yeah. Cause that certainly came across, in Baltimore and others, looking at East Houston, for example, and it's sort of all of those parts of, again, Black culture that developed as a result of segregation. It's like, well, you forced us into these things. We developed these. Now you have a responsibility to help us preserve these things. That's in there.
Can I ask this question too? Because I know we were talking about this earlier we looked at priorities. We were talking about priorities, but then we didn't want to give the impression that these other things are not important. But this is a lot of information, and legislators are not going to read it all. They're not. And where I understand these pieces about we don't want them to get rid of things that we still do think are important, I think practically speaking, we are going to have to put something up front that we think are the most important priorities, because I don't have faith that they will read it all. I just don't. And that's just from experience. And I don't want some of our really strong recommendations that we feel very strongly about that may be further in the draft, that it's buried and they don't grab it. This is a lot of words here. I mean, a lot of words. And just thinking about legislators, they're not going to read it. So I just want to put that back on the table for some further discussion and thought.
Okay. Yeah. Amy, your hand was up, and then we'll go to Janice.
Yeah. Stephanie, thank you, because I've been thinking a lot about, through this whole conversation, there's two threads here. One is content and the other is how to present. And in some ways, I sort of would like the charts to remain as a charts and then in the appendix. As it charts A1 through A8, however many tabs there are. So then it's one way to see the material, and even jumble up the order from how it might be presented in the body of the paper. So that way, if we have any legislators who are looking at criminal justice, which might lead first in one section, maybe material reparations is leading first in the appendix. Do you know what I mean? It's just seeing it in a different way, and the eyes might jump differently. Likewise, maybe, and I know I'm doing Janice and Leah's jobs here, but I'm thinking also, it's like bold, a recommendation, succinct sentence, legal justification in bold, concise sentence, sort of in the narrative part, and then they can unpack it, maybe, I don't know, unpack it more in the charts, in the appendix, something, but we just need them. I agree. We want them to see, read, and absorb all. And how can we do that? Because if not, this work is truly collecting dust, and it needs not to collect dust. We want people to grab hold of, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my stuff here. I mean, it's incredible. I know I dropped the ball on my part of this because I was overwhelmed with other things, but this is an incredible amount of work and it's all important. So how can we rank it? Right? And so so then the question is, how can we present it? And I know that's not my role, but I don't know, I'm just picking up on this thread of how to make it all happen.
No, so Amy, so thank you, because that's exactly what I was going to say, was that we want to do justice to this work. This is the meat of what the commission was designed to tackle. And it has to be accessible. And so sort of the bolding and the simple sentences. I mean, this would be a case where we might make a judgment about what part of the paragraph, what part of it, is the boom, and put it out there, and you all have to give us feedback and say, no, actually it's this part of the paragraph that is the boom. But we do a boom. We do a maybe no more than 10 words, or a single sentence that says this is the recommendation, and then refer to the appendix to flesh it out some. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, Michelle.
You guys have already said, but maybe what goes in the report, those topics with those explanations, and then maybe it's see the appendix for the concrete recommendation to address those subtopics. Maybe the recommendations don't so much make it into the body, similar to what you guys did with part 1 on the case studies, where the case studies are going to be in the appendix. Maybe it's a similar type thing, where you lay out the justification for why we need to increase police accountability. And then that way it really streamline the report, and the legislature is going to have committees. And so if I'm on, I don't know the name of legislator committees, but if I'm on the criminal justice committee, I'm going to focus on the age of the appendix. If I'm on like a mental health committee, I'm going to focus on this part of the appendix. And so that may be a way to break it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amy, your hand was up.
It was, but I think Michelle did it great. Get the recommendations in the body and justification, supporting testimony, etc. It can be in the appendix if anybody needs to have quote unquote proof, and rationale.
I actually said the reverse.
The reverse.
I said get the justification in the body and put the actual recommendations in the appendix. Because the recommendations will be more harder to read. They'll be more like specific versus the justification will be more overarching. It will be more narrative.
Well, yeah, that's why I was thinking, just in terms of, for the, part 2 of the report, if we could at least say, here's the narrative, it's like, so, okay, we've broken it down into these 8 broad categories, with criminal justice reform. All right. It's like we've got, policing and judicial reforms. These are the subcategories. Broadly speaking, here's what we're recommending, sort of, large overview for specific recommendations and the rationales for those recommendations. See appendix, 2-part, and then we, again, we use that numbering system that we develop. But I think, we need to have something in terms of talking about, sort of broadly, I would think, recommendations, writ large, otherwise, people are just going to blow through part 2, not even bother dealing with it. And they may or may not look at the appendices. And so I think we need to have something in that narrative, kind of saying these are the broad, because then again, once we get that, then it becomes that much easier to boil that down into that part of the executive summary.
Oh, somebody has their hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Let me put my hand up.
Commissioner Hughes.
I have a question about the extent to which we want to target in here specific state programs. I think a lot of the recommendations are general, which is fair in terms of focusing on the outcome goal. But I do wonder if we should also include, the idea of communities that have been impacted by these events getting, extra points in funding programs for, some of the various DHCD programs or whatever. Do we want to get that granular, or is it better to be more broad as far as, this is the outcome we want? We want support of Black businesses, which is in here. But I wonder, is it worthwhile to be looking at what does commerce offer already, that we want certain communities that have gone through this to get a leg up in terms of how applications are rated and ranked or that sort of thing. That might be too in the weeds, and we leave it up to the General Assembly to figure out how to do that, or agencies, but just wasn't sure what we were thinking about that.
It's a good question.
I kind of have an answer, but I also want to, Stephanie, do you want to, I could respond to Elizabeth?
You can respond, and I'd like to respond after you respond, and then I'll bring in what the other
Okay.
thing.
Okay. I think that to the extent we can get granular and specific, I think that's great. I'll just admit I lack a familiarity with Maryland's programs. And so if that's knowledge that you have or someone else on the commission has or anyone has, then I think we should, if we can name specific things. I did want to point out, Nick, if you could go, and this kind of also is an answer to the question Stephanie asked a few minutes ago about how are we addressing the people that have specifically been impacted by lynchings. Could you go to the criminal justice recommendations and go to row 43? And I just want to point out language that I use to try to get to that. And it also kind of goes a little bit to what you were saying, Elizabeth, that we could pull in similar language. So I said increase investments in housing, employment, education, nutrition, mental health care in communities where an African American was lynched or where the descendants of African Americans from those communities currently reside. And the reason I framed it that way is so that there would be that specific link between the remedy and the harm, as opposed to saying Black communities, right? Where there may be Black communities that have not been impacted by a lynching. There may be Black communities that, as Stephanie has, been her point frequently, is that have not even been in the United States at the time when these types of things were occurring, right? Because they're not descendants of American slavery. And so what we really want to get to is like, where were these communities impacted by these lynchings? And I didn't want to just limit it to the communities, because we know as a result of lynchings, a lot of people fled their communities. They went to Baltimore, they went to where have you. And so if we trace the community where the lynching occurred, and then we also look at where the descendants of the people who lived in that community at the time went, in actuality, it will envelop probably most Black Marylanders. But it's a way to do that that's not just saying Black people, but is really tying it to the occurrence of the lynching.
Commissioner Coles, I appreciate that, because I was going to say something about that. I was
like, I'm not going to take away your talking point. I got to give you credit.
Saying that, because it's very important that we link this to the people who were harmed.
Yeah.
And this universal Blackness does not do it. It just does not.
Right.
And so Ms. Hughes, when you brought up, about the people who were harmed, I think it's a very important point. And even like, people use the language differently, and I appreciate the way Commissioner Coles used African American, but there are even some people, when we think of African American, we're thinking of people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery here, but sometimes other people don't think of African Americans as that. So she's using it in that way. I don't use African American in that way. I use it differently. In terms of, I see myself as a descendant of U.S. chattel slavery. I don't call myself African American, but I know different people look at that very differently. And so language here about Black people, I think needs to be, and I want to say this to the 3PV consulting people. This is just my perspective. I do think we need to be careful about the language that we're using, because I don't think that this is about all Black people. I don't at all. And I want to make that patently clear. I know I have in the past. I want to say that very clearly, because now we're at the end.
Yeah.
And there, as everybody on this committee knows, there have been generations of people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery who have been harmed by many policies. And so when we're using terms of flat Blackness, it doesn't get at the people who were really harmed for centuries. And so even if we're using the term African American in the way that Commissioner Coles has named it, I think we need to spell out who they are. Because
so this is then precisely why I'm wanting the commissioners to take responsibility for saying, this is the language we want in the report. Don't leave that up to us. Don't leave that up to us. This is your report. Say specifically which language is inviolable, right? And which language we can mess with, right? So you all need to say that. Yeah. Don't leave that
I'm
up to
not
us.
a commissioner, but I'm saying it to the commissioners.
Okay.
I think that we need to spell out.
So then I would say you need to say to the commissioners, these sentences must stay as they are, and the rest of them can be edited. We're gonna task you all with that, to work that out among yourselves.
And we may need a definition, because it does differ so much by people. Some people say Black American, some people say African American, some people say African descendants of slavery. There are a lot of different words. And I think what we are trying to get to is the people harmed by the culture of lynching. And so maybe it might be worth noting that different people use different terms, but to be specific, this is the community that we're trying to address.
Yes, and that's exactly why I was saying we need to define what African American is if we're going to use that.
Yeah, and I'm not wedded to African American. If it's Black American, if it's another preferred term, then we can consider that. I'm not wedded to it. I know that was Jesse Jackson's term of art. I grew up in my generation with it being that, so I consider myself African American, but I know that there's a lot of debate on the proper terminology.
Well, and just on a personal note, I'm married to a Jamaican who immigrated from the UK, and so I use Black because it covers all of us. But I understand why that. But I love what you said, Stephanie, about universal Blackness. I mean, it's a thing, but it's not a thing related to this issue, right?
So, his ancestors were not lynched in Maryland.
Exactly.
So we gotta dice that.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
And then, so the other thing I was just going to say, going back to how we're going to write the report, and I understand your point, Commissioner Creary, about just kind of giving a little bit of depth, just to kind of frame it. But can that framing be somewhat limited to like a short paragraph? Because I think Commissioner Millen brings up a very good point. I'm going to tell you, if I'm looking at a document, I would be looking at the real concise sentences really quickly. Give me a little bit of context. Give me a little bit of context. maybe a paragraph, maybe 2 short paragraphs, and then give me just that one quick, concise line. So I would know, okay, this is their recommendations, because I'm afraid that they won't go to the appendix and look at the recommendations. So I think it's kind of a combination of both, just not making that context so heavy, so dense. But doing those kind of one line in bold. Here's the recommendations very concisely. Here's the legal justification, 1 or 2 sentences, with preferably a statute that could be attached, if we have that, right? But I think a combination of both would be good. But I would put those concise recommendations in the body of the document, because I'm afraid they're not going to look at the appendix.
Mhm. Yeah. Dr. Wiebelhaus-Brom, you had your hand up earlier.
I think largely what I was going to say would just be reiterating what Michelle said a few minutes ago, and that, I think one of the recommendations, the extent to which you can be specific about what should be done and who or what should do it, it's all to the better. But at the same time, if you just don't know, we're unsure what might be the best place, better to leave it vague. And I think there's just not time to follow up and find, to find out what the correct path is for every single thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just thinking about, language and terminology, I will oftentimes, sort of, in my writing, sort of talk about Americans of African descent, but I'm liking, the so-called race neutral, the idea of people in communities harmed by the culture of racial terror lynching. That covers who we want. We know practically who that is, but it's also leaving it open enough so that people can't say, well, this is just something for Black folks. Again, it goes back to Commissioner Cole's idea of, using the legislation that we found in the Pauli Murray piece, looking at those specific pieces of legislation that ostensibly were race neutral, but had the impact on African Americans. I mean, let's be honest about it. So I think using something like people in communities harmed by the culture of racial terror lynching in Maryland, I'm liking that idea. If other folks want to, because now again, economy of language, that's a lot more syllables and words than just saying Blacks or African Americans. However, getting that kind of specificity, and using it, that I think will give us the cover that we might need to sort of deal with folks coming from red parts of the state, and making sure that they can't say, well, this is just for Black folks. Like, this is for people who were harmed by this culture. Now, if that happens to be Black folk, well, that's fine, but this is who we're reaching out to and trying to, sort of create that repair for these people in these communities, who are still feeling the effects of that. And that's another thing that we're going to need to get into part 2 at some point, is, talking about the through lines, from era of racial terror lynching to the present, and talking about how the oppression doesn't end, but it adapts, so that, yeah, we're not doing racial terror lynching anymore, but we had legal lynchings and we had these other manifestations of it, whether it's Freddie Gray, Corin Gaines, or, again, somebody was talking about somebody, who was a member of the Baltimore Black Panthers who spent 40 some years in jail, and sort of looking at that as another example of that ongoing adapting oppression, and that, again, I don't know that we have anything specific to the recommendations that addresses that, but yeah, that's something that we're going to need to talk about.
Yeah.
Commissioner Coles.
If you could scroll down one more row, just because you mentioned Polly Murray. So if you could go to row 44. So there's a recommendation for addressing systemic racism and a recommendation that the legislature goes through all Maryland state statutes that may have a connection to the racist past and repeal any of those statutes, and also look at what should be done to address the harm that was caused by statutes essentially passed in Jim Crow. And so I referenced Polly Murray's book as a great place they could start to see all of the it was probably not exhaustive, but many of the racially exclusionary laws that were passed prior to the civil rights era. And then second thing, I just want to emphasize, Nick, that I think the frame that you gave about who we're addressing, and it ties in also, Stephanie, with your point. I think not only is it important from a moral standpoint of making sure that the remedy is going to the people that was harmed, but I also think it's so important from a legal standpoint, especially as the 14th Amendment is being used now as a sword to attack efforts to achieve racial justice. And I think the best way for us to avoid the 14th Amendment being used that way against us is to not ground our recommendations in race. And to be clear, these are not remedies for Black people. These are remedies for people who are affected by racial terror lynchings. And the fact that that is majority Black people, you can't call it a coincidence, but that's what the remedy is going towards, right? And so I think that, like, we just have to make sure that we keep that argument essentially in all of the recommendations, and just be like conscious of that as we're, if it's missing in some places where maybe we do go too broad and say, oh, free scholarships for all Black people, to just kind of remind us that, we need to just keep it connected to addressing the harm from lynching, and where we can connect it to those communities affected, continue to do so.
Okay.
So here's another place where I struggle a bit, and I understand it. I understand the practicality of it, and I do understand the legal argument too, Commissioner Coles, that you're making, particularly around the 14th Amendment and where we are around race. But in that affirmative action case, they started talking about lineage. And there is a difference between that racial impact and that lineage impact. And so I say that because most of the people who were harmed in this country, period, have descended from U.S. chattel slavery. And so then we're not just talking about race, we're talking about lineage, and it's impacted a specific group of people. And one of the things I'm very concerned about at this point, because it's been perpetuated for centuries, is this muting of truth that comes from people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery. Every other group can talk specifically about the harm that is happening to them, and no one is offended, no one is upset. Jewish people can be very direct about the harms that have occurred to them. Immigrants can be very direct about the harms that have occurred to them. Native Americans can, Latinx, Hispanics can, women can. But when Black people, specifically when we start partialing out ethnicity as those of us who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, it's a problem. So where I struggle is I understand the practicality. This is what has been normative in the culture for centuries, but how do we disrupt that? If this is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and we're pushing things forth, don't we owe it to the people who are victims of these lynchings to speak specifically to that issue? I'm really challenged here. And when I think about the legal support, the legal reform, I think about that affirmative action case, and it was specifically in, it wasn't in the dissent, it was a statement that was made, and I forget by which justice, but talked specifically about lineage and how that was different than race. So what are we doing here? I put that on the table for discussion, for us to think about, to grapple with, because I recognize the practicality of this, but are we doing business as usual? Are we still, once again, as Black people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, just going along to get along and just saying things to make other people feel good, but not speaking the truth about really what our experience has been?
I mean, my initial thought is you're not wrong. um, and so, yeah, how do we represent and reflect that while at the same time trying to balance, because again, I think it was you, Commissioner Close, was saying, there's a difference between being race neutral and not identifying race, or race non-specific. And, while that seems to be the going trend, as you said, sort of turning the 14th Amendment into a sword, that's being used against us now. Yeah, I mean, I think, they're both valid points, and yet, how do we find a way to acknowledge that without necessarily, putting ourselves in a position that's going to get us shut down? When folks from, rural red Frederick or Carroll County say, hey, this is for Black people, this is violating my 14th Amendment rights to equal protection because you're providing a benefit to this particular group that's not available to everybody. Yeah, because, not everybody was affected by racial terror, lynching, and its legacies. I get that, but yeah, how do we find a way to, I don't know if we're trying to balance the two or trying to incorporate both of those, but yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm not sure if maybe, well, first of all, I had to leave my computer. As you guys know, I have to pick up my son at 4:30. So that's why I'm on my phone now. And when I was switching to my phone, the sound was going in and out. So to be honest, Stephanie, I only was able to hear part of what you said. And I apologize for that. I was trying to get to a place where I could hear. But what I think I'm hearing you say is I feel like it's exactly what I'm trying to address. I'm not trying to make it a race neutral remedy. What I'm saying is definitionally, if you say, let's say our commission was looking at reparations for slavery as opposed to lynching. And if you said, the remedy is going to be structured around everyone who descends from people who were enslaved in the United States. Well, we all know that category is 100% Black people who are descended from Africa. And so you don't even have to say it's Black people, because they're the only people that definitionally meet the category of who was enslaved in the United States. And I think it's the same thing with racial terror lynchings. 99.9%, with maybe a possible exception of some Jewish people, maybe there were Italian people in New Orleans, but we're not in Louisiana, so that's not a case that we're referencing. Plus, our commission was set up to look at specifically the lynchings of African Americans. All that being said, the only people that meet the criteria are Black Marylanders, Black people who have been Marylanders for generations. And so my only point in framing it that way is because you no longer can attack us with these colorblind requirements, because we're not creating a color category. We're creating an experience category. We're creating a harm category that only Black people fall into. And so that's why I was saying it that way. But I'm trying to make a suggestion to get at the very point that you're making, that we're not creating an umbrella that everyone is going to fall into, that it is going to be with laser precision targeted towards the Black people that have been impacted by this history.
No, I get that, and I understand exactly what you're trying to do. And I guess it's just probably for me, saying it specifically to their faces, because I feel like there's been a denial for so long. Like even at the Lynching Memorial Project's conference that they had, I felt a lot of ways, and I said, be quiet today. Even that speaker, who was a Hispanic Latinx man, who talked about the lynchings that happened to Latinx people and Hispanic people. And he shared that. And it's unfortunate that that occurred. But some of the language he was using was like, we're always talking basically, and I'm paraphrasing, about Black people in this country who were lynched, but we were lynched too. And I felt like that was an undermining of the distinct experience that we as Black people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery have experienced in this country more than anybody. And that it has been disparate and that it has been intentional. And so part of me bringing this to the table is, I will say, it's part of who I am, to directly confront it and name it specifically.
I understand.
And
You're
so,
talking about erasure. You're like,
It is.
let's not sugarcoat. It's erasure. If you don't, and I definitely think our narratives will make it quite clear who was targeted and why. And it'll be clear in our recommendations as well. But I understand the point you're making. Like, you don't even want it to be it can't be glossed over in any way.
that's it, because I think it's been glossed over too long.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm thinking about this, and again, the reference to the Italians that were lynched in New Orleans. I mean, and there again, because I was thinking that that's precedent for monetary, compensation to the
They got
victim.
it too.
Yeah.
They got compensation.
Yeah, $25,000 in 1890s money. That's got to translate to something pretty substantial. To say nothing of the people and the descendants of the Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, so there are precedents, and again, I think we can certainly say, well, if in these instances monetary reparations were warranted and effected, and again, we can talk about the specifically racialized nature, particularly for the Japanese, survivors of internment. Similarly, we should be able to make a similar case, as Commissioner Coles is saying, for that category of experience of those people who were harmed by racial terror lynching, and those communities and the descendants of those people who were harmed. I think that is, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but that strikes me that's a distinct class. So that if we were to sort of talk about it in terms of a class action thing, I mean, basically, the upshot is, that's ultimately going to be Black folk.
I'm trying. I understand completely what you all are saying. I'm trying to get at this language where I think it needs to be said specifically. So, like, even if I give an example of the child welfare system and those children that are removed from their parents, and that Black children, and I'm saying Black generally because the data isn't disaggregated, but I am 99.99999% sure that the majority of those children are those who descend from U.S. chattel slavery. I think about this family separation that happened because of lynching. How many of these kids wound up parentless that may have gone into a colored orphan asylum that we don't talk about? We only talk about the boarding schools for Native American children. But the numbers and the scores of children that were orphaned because of different reasons. And so I bring that up, and again, I don't want to belabor it. I don't know the language. I understand what you're saying, but there is I feel very strongly about naming it and saying, this is what happened. This is our history. We no longer can hide it. And I feel like using that language, even though it is an experience, is hiding it in some ways to me. And I understand why you want to do it. But I feel like it needs to be directly confronted and directly said.
I wonder if we can do both, right? Like
I was
name
just
it,
gonna say,
and then also, you know what I mean? Like, because then they're both there. They're both of those categories, justifications, definitions, they're there. And so at least we're giving the court something where it's like there is a racial category, but there's also, a category that is not defined by race, but by experience. And so they can kind of pick their tools of how to analyze the challenges.
And I wonder too, Commissioner Coles, if some of that can be done with a disparate treatment kind of analysis legally.
Right. Which they're
Right.
trying to get rid of.
Right.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering if
Right.
some of that
Yeah.
can figure into that.
I mean, 'cause here again, as a historian, I'm thinking, well, yeah, let's lay out that history. Clearly, this was aimed at Black folks, as you say, Counselor, American descendants of slavery. Clearly, the targets here, and we can talk about that as a particular experience. But we're looking at this, and again, have that there, boom, in the introduction or part one. But then we say, as we start talking about the recommendations, given current legal state of affairs, we are talking about a class of people who have had this common experience that transcends, the category of race. And as, Commissioner was saying, you now have both tools there as possibilities for the legislature to pick up and run with, as they see fit. But we've at least put both of them in there.
I'm scribbling as fast as I can. and I will expect you all to push back and say we haven't said it forcefully enough, or we said it too much, or da 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 da. I mean, and this is again where I think putting the language into the spreadsheet is going to make it easier for all of us. If there's a place where it just needs to be said much more emphatically with much stronger language, please put it in the spreadsheet so that we can just easily plug and play. We don't want to delay this process any more than it has been. We want this to work. We want this to get in the hands of the legislatures, well, you know what I'm saying, as soon as possible. And so this then is where the language precision is essential, and we need you all to do that. I'm hearing you. We're going to do our best. But if we start off with really strong language that everybody says, yes, this names and says what we're trying to say, it's a lot easier process to get this thing out.
So can I assign homework so that, if people, and again, I'm, specifically, Councilor Franklin, if you've got strong views on this, our homework is to make sure that we get that represented somewhere on the spreadsheet.
I got it. I got so much work to do this weekend. You have no idea.
I'm right there with you.
Oh, God.
I know. It's like, and at some point I've got to start packing up my place too. And it's just like, I don't, yeah. I mean, I think to a certain extent, yeah, this is what comes of being a volunteer
It sure does.
institution. But to the extent that we can get as much of this on there, ideally before 11:30 on Monday.
Okay, I have until 11:30 Monday or
That's
11 o'clock.
that's when the commission meeting is. So, and I will probably, try to, realistically Sunday, send out what we've got to the commission so that they can at least, maybe have 12 hours to try to look at it before the meeting. But yeah, I mean, we're in the midst of, we got a tight turnaround here.
Nick, how do you see Monday's meeting going? Because we have so many recommendations. I doubt that we can even read all of them, much less discuss them. What's your game plan?
That's a really good question. I mean, my hope is, and again, I know better than to expect that the commissioners will have read through all of this. Heck, if I send it out on Monday,
Not on Sunday.
I'll be on Sunday, I'll be pleasantly surprised if half or more actually even opened it up and take a look at any of it.
I think you'd have to give people at least a week if you had a hope that they were going to read it.
Yeah.
Amy's got her hand up too.
Michelle, it's a great question. I think that when you send it out, here's one suggestion. When you send it out, the recommendation is that commissioners read. I mean, I would do it as the Google Doc or the charts, number one,
Mhm.
that they attend to the titles on the tabs,
Mhm.
right? The overarching categories, then columns A and B, the type of reform and that specific recommendation. If somebody, that's what they need to actually, we're asking them to approve the recommendations. So they need to then attend to the tabs, column A and column B. If somebody has the time, interest, bandwidth, etc., we would love for them to go C, D, E, etc. But we really need them to understand those overarching tabs, the type of reform, and the recommendation. We are not parsing language. We're not language beyond some of what we've already just discussed, but we're not asking them, it's not about period, punctuation, this word or that word. That's not what this is about. It's the intent of that recommendation. Now, the question that we've been discussing over the last, 20, 30, 40 minutes is, how intentional and calling out the history instead of erasing it. I sort of feel like that decision needs to be made prior to Monday's meeting as well. And then we will hear from the commission if there's pushback, if it's too soft or too hard or whatever. If there's mute on that topic, then fine, we move forward. And I hope we're not being recorded. But I'm saying I think we need to put out whatever this committee is recommending, including the language of the last 30 minutes. I really do. Let them react to it. Let the commission react to it.
And Stephanie, I also wanted to point out the justification columns. I was very specific about the connection to to black people, to whatever term we're going with there, but how the harm impacted black people specifically. So I would just consider that as well, that would also be a part of the report. I mean, pretty much everyone is a connection to how black people have been impacted by the racial terror lynchings specifically.
So I read that too, Commissioner Coles. And so to Commissioner Millen's point, I know they're going to be directed to this document. Should there be, to accompany that, Commissioner Creary, you talked about like the framing and the context. Should there be just a short paragraph introducing each of these 8 areas and then directing them to this document so they have some sense of what these areas are?
I did one for criminal justice. I don't know if other people are able to do one for the other categories. That could kind of just be an umbrella for what's covered in there and why we're making recommendations along those lines. But I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody feel like
More
writing
homework.
Yep, exactly. It's more homework. I mean, as I'm going through stuff, I can try to write something up, but if other folks want to take one or more of these, that would be wonderful, kind of like the summary that Commissioner Coles put here, right, in the recommendation type of reform summary.
I could probably do another one. So just let me know which one you want me to. But yeah, I think we could probably tackle those.
Yeah, do you need, I made the recommendation, so I need to do something with it. Even though I don't, yeah, I'm about to kill myself here. I don't know which one you want me to do.
Maybe you could
Which
do
one?
the material one.
Material.
If you want to
Okay.
take a stab at that one, that would be good.
Yeah.
Amy,
Thank
do you
you.
think you could do the symbolic one?
I'm actually at my parents' house taking care of them this weekend for some unexpected stuff. So
Okay.
I don't want to say something since I'm not.
Yeah, I can try to take on symbolic since I put a lot of the stuff in there
Okay.
anyway.
I could try to do, if you want me to do education, I could try to do the education one.
Okay, that would be great.
Is it worth asking? I'm sorry. I just lost my whole entire thought. Is it worth asking some of the commissioners who did fill this out? I know Chris is on vacation, but
This is on vacation.
yeah, I'm just thinking, an email to a couple of the others who.
Oh, I'm sure Taisha, I could ask Taisha if she would do that. I'm not sure if any other commissioners ended up.
Okay, well, at least if Taisha can do hers, then
Yeah, she could
Yeah.
do, I'm sure she'll do media for us.
Yeah. Yeah, or that was media, right? Not journalism.
Yeah,
Mhm.
media.
media.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, did we finish the categories yet before I jump in?
Not yet. Yeah, we have criminal justice, symbolic, education, media. Chris did mental health. So we would need, somebody to do mental health and then material and community healing.
I was going to do material.
Okay.
Commissioner Coles asked me to do that.
Okay, great. So,
I can also take a stab at mental health.
okay.
That would be great.
That's only 6 categories, I think.
Wait, hold on. We've got
Did community healing?
3, 4,
That's
5. I've got, yeah, so we would need community healing.
Which one did you say you're doing, Nick? You said you're doing
I
symbolic.
think symbolic, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to take community healing then.
Okay, thank you.
And I need this done Sunday by what time, Commissioner Creary?
Honestly, I'm gonna try to get this out. Knowing me and sort of the way I work, I'll probably try to get it out by 11. So why don't we say by 9 o'clock Sunday night?
That works.
Okay.
I was getting ready to ask something else and I forgot. I'm getting up there in age. I actually forgot. I needed to ask something else that was important.
It'll hit you about 5 minutes after we hop off. That's when it hits me. It's like, ah, damn, that's what I wanted to
But okay, so I'm not counting correctly. We got Coles has already done criminal justice. Stephanie's doing material. Nick's doing symbolic. Coles is doing education. Taisha's doing media. Chris, somebody else is doing mental health.
I am.
Okay, and somebody's doing community healing, and there's one more.
Yep.
Are you saying there's one more tab?
Aren't there 8? Aren't there 8 categories?
I'm not sure.
Yes, but criminal justice already has one. So
I counted that. I
Okay.
counted that.
Just go through the tabs, Chris. Can you start at criminal? I'm sorry, I said Chris. Nick, can you start at criminal justice and just tab through?
Sure. So we got criminal justice. I've got symbolic. Michelle C is taking education. We're gonna ask Taisha to do media. Counselor Franklin said she was gonna do mental health. Yeah. And then we need material.
I'm doing material.
Oh, okay.
Material. And then community healing.
And community and healing. So
It's 7.
yeah, so
Okay.
it's like we're all set.
And
Okay.
that the last tab is just draft recommendations that I just kind of left there because I didn't want to delete them, but you
Yeah.
don't have to pay attention to that tab.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was me starting to, initially going through my notes on the April hearing. Like, for example, I was just going back through that. Cheryl Grill said, oh yeah, well, if you take a look at these chapters in the California final report, and I'm just like, yeah, I haven't had a chance to go through those 3 or 4 chapters. But here were again sort of the 7 categories that she had there. And again, it looks like we've got some other things in there that we'll need to possibly incorporate. But yeah, if you've got ideas or things from the April hearing that you want to include, yep, now's the time.
I just wanted to say this. I know Amy needs to leave.
Mhm.
She raised a really good point about this conversation that we have been having around language and that it needs to be done like this weekend. Are we in agreement with that? Do you want me to write what I think from my perspective and we all
Yes.
do, or how do you want that to be done?
I would say if anybody has ideas about it, let's get it in there somehow, somewhere, and again, if we need to put that in that last draft one, or if we need to set up another tab for a specific language, we can do that too, however you want.
Can you do that so it doesn't get mixed in with all the recommendations, have like a separate tab?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Just do that.
Here's my concern. If people are voting, and Amy suggested, look at the tabs, look at column A and B, and then this language is in some other tab that's way at the end. It complicates our task if we're looking for precise language to put into part 2 of the report.
Where should we put it then for your ease?
The question is, how are people going to vote? Are people going to look at that tab to vote on that new language? It's a process question. It's a process question for you all. It's not for us.
Yeah. So I don't think that the commission should see the draft hearing recommendations. I think they need, it might not be this Google Doc. They just need to see the sort of do we say there are 8 buckets? You need to see the 8 buckets, 8 tabs, like
7.
whatever the final
7.
thing, 7.
Yeah.
Not draft hearing recommendations, not an internal committee conversation about language. Like it just needs to be presented. And now I'm reopening up the can of worms. I almost feel like if we had the space in this report to name that words are important, words are important, labels, titles are important, and that I almost want to reflect the conversation we just had that all just took place. because that is so important, and is actually the fact that there's a restriction, right? This commission may be feeling restricted on what words can and cannot be used. And that is a result of the oppression and the history.
Mhm.
And so it almost is like there needs to be an explanation that words, it's tough. And this might be the word that we're using for this report.
Mhm.
But say that even our language is being oppressed.
Yeah.
I'm using our lowercase o. I'm not. I hope I didn't step out of my lane there. I apologize.
Okay.
You know that. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'll just be quiet at this point. I
No,
don't know. I
No,
almost feel
that
like it
was
needs.
excellent.
That was a
The struggle
excellent.
needs to be named. The struggle needs to be named.
Absolutely.
Well,
yes.
I
Great
would
point,
say
Amy.
let's set up a separate tab so we can say, a note on language, and we can just put all of our thoughts there and hopefully
I
translate.
think Amy's saying not in this document.
No, but this is a working document. That's fine. We can always lift tabs 1 through
Right.
7 and put it in that in
Yeah.
a new, and just keep this as
Mhm.
our not wordsmithing, but
Yeah.
thought thinking. Yeah.
And Nick,
Okay.
can you lock, when you send it to all the commissioners, can you make it so that they can only comment and not edit, just so that we
I
can steer people
that's
towards commenting?
I think that's how we have it right now.
Okay.
Let me just see, because looks like comment. Yeah, looks like all of the
Okay.
commissioners are commenters. James Moore, why is he an editor? Who is he? Just
I don't know who that is.
I don't know, but yeah, he's commenting now.
Our statute, I kind of have forgotten. This is just a question.
Mhm.
I know our report is due in December. Does it really say December 1st? I was surprised when it says December 1st.
It
Drafts. Okay.
does, if
All
I
right.
recall correctly.
All right. Not December 15th, not December 25th.
No, it's supposed to be December 1. Oh,
Okay.
Commissioner Franklin, let me make you an editor. Councilor Franklin, yeah.
But she must be an editor because she was able to add things to the spreadsheet. So
yeah. Well, I don't know how, don't know why, but now it's official, and hopefully everybody else. Well, I'm guessing if you did that, you were putting, it was taking your comments. So, but yeah, as of right now, no, doggone it. It looks like everybody here.
maybe
should
just
have-
ask them, just in case it's a similar issue, just ask them to not make any changes to the document itself, but if they have feedback, to please make it as a comment. If you could just say that explicitly.
Okay.
And that tab there, let's move it out of this document so that the commissioners don't see this draft tab.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll just
But don't
hopefully.
delete it because it's got good stuff.
Well, my hope is to kind of just be able to take all of this and move it to another.
Move it where it belongs.
Yeah,
That
move
would
it
be
to where
great.
that belongs, and then we can ZOTS this tab and
Perfect.
figure out what we're going to do for language.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of people's time. I mean, you guys have been wonderful, and this has been a wonderfully rich conversation. So thank you for that.
I'm so excited. We're getting near the finish line.
Yeah, I'm excited too, but it's more kind of like the adrenals are going into overdrive saying, ah!
It's like at a time when justice is retreating so quickly in our country, if we could be a part of the first real reparations effort for, for Black people, Black
Mhm.
descendants of slavery, however, whatever words we want to use. It's so exciting. So it's been a real privilege to be a part of this.
Doing it in the midst of the ongoing, encroachment of
Assault.
authoritarianism. Yes, I mean, we get to sort of
Yeah.
stick it to them, however uncomfortable it may be.
Yes.
Oh, yes, and as the proverb goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and so yes, success is many mothers, failure is an orphan,
Yes.
and this has definitely been a group effort, and I can't thank you all enough for all of the work that you have done to get us to this point and to get us over the line in the next 48 hours.
And we
Yes.
remain honored to be entrusted with pulling this all together. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that, because yeah, the thought of let's write the group, the final report as a group project. Yeah, that's not cool. As the conversation has certainly shown.
Right.
Had some great ideas, but we need somebody to be able to take that and harness it and turn it into positive text, which I know as a group we would be challenged
Yeah.
to do. So thank you to Janice and Leah for all of your efforts making us sound coherent.
We're doing our best.
Well,
All right.
have a wonderful weekend. Hopefully you won't spend too much time doing homework, but please, do the homework, and hopefully by 9:00 my time. So I guess that gives you till midnight, on the East Coast, to get
You were on the West Coast. Thank you for that.
Oh.
Great. Thank you for that.
which basically means, if I get it by 9:00 my time, that's midnight your time, I will just, try to sort it through and get it out, within that next hour or so. So that would still give people about 12 hours. Yeah.
Because
Actually,
nobody's gonna sleep.
yeah. We're gonna. Do we have to
They'll be
actually
waiting at
vote on
midnight
it?
for it, right?
Do we have
Nick,
what?
do we actually? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do we actually have to vote on it on Monday? Because to be honest, I feel like it's a little unfair to give people this huge document and give them no time to read it and then say we want your vote. Is there a way we could just use Monday's meeting to talk about it, present it, let them have till Friday, and then somehow send your vote by email? Or can we? Is that an option?
I mean, we can do that. Yeah, that would be.
Okay.
That's,
It feels
that's
sneaky.
definitely doable. Yeah, no, because that way, we kind of say, all right, here, we're going to walk you through it.
We'll walk you through it.
And then, if you have anything that you want to add, or if you have any concerns,
Yeah.
get them to us
Yeah.
by email by noon Friday. If you
Yeah.
don't send anything by then, we presume that you agree with everything that we have here.
That works. I mean, so many smart, experienced people on the commission that I think we owe it to them to, to get their input. They may have ideas that we haven't thought of. Let's just give them that week so we get everything there, and then we'll be good to go on Friday.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
I like
But it has to be plug and play, because our
Yes.
task is to have stuff
Yes.
done by the 15th.
Which is insane. That's insane.
Right.
Mhm.
I
Can we
agree.
give y'all another week?
You all have to make that decision, because we have to get it to the legislature, right? I mean, you give us another year, sure, we take it, but the question is, when does this need to get done, and how does it get done in the best possible way? And so, give it some thought, let us know, but also give us some leeway, or figure out what makes the most sense for what it is the commission is trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll be part of the conversation on Monday.
Okay. So should we be at the meeting on Monday or not? It seems like we don't. Do we need to be there?
if you can be, I think it wouldn't hurt if you're able to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could be there like on mute with no cameras, but it just might be helpful to hear
Okay.
if there is any conflicts, that you're aware of them.
Okay. So that's Monday at 11 a.m.
Um,
If someone could drop us
11:30.
the link, if someone could invite us, that would be great. Because I
Yeah.
don't, is it on the website? I don't think so.
It's on the website.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Coles,
It's
Commissioner Creary,
yes.
should the public be there?
Yeah,
All our meetings are open to the public.
It's open to the public, so yeah, absolutely. And as far
I'm
as
only I'm kind of swamped, but depending on whether or not you want me there, I'll just have to move some things.
absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, you're a part of the committee, so yes,
Yeah,
please be there.
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, you're all part of the committee, so yes, you should all be there and chime in, because I think, that perspective is too important not to be in that conversation on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need more time.
Yeah.
Fantastic
no,
work, everyone. Fantastic work.
Yes. Thank you
Thank you.
all for your work.
That's-
And
Oh,
yes,
and Michelle, can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay,
Yes.
I'm on my phone, so people's bubbles don't always pop up. If you see anything missing, because I feel like you've been kind of closer to the ground on this than anyone, could you flag it for us if you think we're missing any buckets or recommendations, or even if you want to share the spreadsheet, possibly with the interns that did all the analysis, if they want to look at it and let us know if they think we're missing anything, we'd welcome
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. I can totally take a look. There were only 2 students involved in the analysis, and that was like a year and a half ago. So the rest has been me, but absolutely. I'll take a look. But it's looking amazing. It's looking amazing. Very comprehensive. It's looking amazing.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for all your help.
thank you. Yes. All right.
That what was it called? Like the table of contents thing that went with the analysis. So helpful in just like catching buckets and making sure we got everything. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's been a privilege. It's been a privilege.
As I said, I mean, it's like over 300 some pages. Yeah, that's a substantial piece of work. It's made life a lot easier for all of us. So, again,
Yes.
can't thank you enough. So, all right. Well, we are more than 10 minutes over, and we all have homework. So go enjoy your weekend while you can before you get to the homework. So, yeah, I will see you all on Monday, if not before.
Okay.
See ya.
Thank
Hey,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Take good care.
Have a great
Well,
week.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.